Hello, everyone. This is BigReed, and this is episode 19 of Gaming's Lost Memories. And today we will be talking about the Wii U and Nintendo's transition from the Wii to the Wii U and what laid the groundwork for the Nintendo Switch. I feel like this is a super interesting time, and we'll hop right into it in just one second. But wanted to give a general update of just the podcast. So, life is crazy. I have banked a few episodes, which I will be releasing, that cover a few topics that I wanted to discuss based upon, a game I've been playing and just kind of thoughts and discussions that I've had with friends. But was really thinking about the forgotten Nintendo Wii U console. And I've been thinking about that for a while. And one of the things that kind of kicked off this thought process was Nintendo's unique transition and the sandwiched consoles they've had for the past three. And we've discussed, I think, like the Wii and DS a little bit. But someone I was speaking with, so one of my buddies, had mentioned that, when we were playing GameCube and PS2, that from the NES and the beginning consoles of this current generation, this current video game industry, I will say. So it reset with the NES. I'm a big proponent on that. That's when Nintendo came in and kind of stabilized the industry, brought it back from being completely dead, and that was the start of this current video game industry. So the past like 35 to 37 years or so. And it's funny to say that because my friend said as much time has passed from when we were talking about the GameCube and PS2 and Nintendo's legacy and the NES and Super Nintendo, the 64, as how much time has transpired from then till now. So it's been, 20 plus years. So like 24, 23 years since the PS2, GameCube, Xbox launch. And I'm sure a lot of you that have been playing video games, for a long time or who are in their 30s like myself, that kind of made me sit down and take a seat. And I was just like, goodness gracious, I'm old. But what's interesting is how much perception has changed and how many shifts there have been in the video game industry. So, I wrapped up my discussions on Microsoft and Xbox and kind of, how they came in and, where the Xbox brand could be and my kind of thoughts on that. And it's been interesting to see the perception of Nintendo. So to go back in time a little bit, during, the console wars of Super Nintendo and Genesis, and then PlayStation, Nintendo, Sega, and then Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, and just all of the transitions, I feel like we're so far removed, and maybe I just don't see it as much anymore because obviously like I'm older and busy. But the console wars just going on. There were message boards early on, but they were archaic to like what they are now. And now there's just so many different websites and so many different outlets. Like social media exists now, for example, that where you can express your opinion and discuss things. And I know there's still some stuff going on with Xbox and, PlayStation, but it's nothing like it was back in the day where what console either your parents got you scrounged up enough money to purchase, or which consoles you could afford. You kind of, hitched your wagon and everybody's arguing, and the console wars were just kind of like a funny time. And you don't see that exist anymore. So current day Nintendo, they're riding high on the success of the Nintendo Switch. You got the Mario movies, you got Pokemon, like all of their IPs are just so huge that Nintendo is just kind of viewed as almost like a Disney-esque type of company where it's just like, yeah, these are our childhood memories. Everyone's always loved Nintendo. They always do great by Mario. And I just remember being in the trenches for some of these discussions, and I'm like, man, people hated Nintendo. And when I say, listen, that's not 100%, obviously, but it was Nintendo is for kids. They're terrible. They're stupid. And only Nintendo fans were buying, consoles Nintendo consoles to play Nintendo games on for the exclusive stuff, and then of course you'd have to go get an Xbox or a PlayStation to play all of your, M-rated third-party content. And just watching Nintendo kind of shift and grow over the years, they just ultimately they've always been one of my favorite game companies, but I think they're the definition of the video game industry at this point. And if there is ever a market correction or Microsoft does exit the hardware industry, which I think they're going to do, I think there's probably like maybe if we ever have a video game collapse or restructuring, like we did 35 years ago, I think Nintendo is one of five-ish companies that would ultimately survive and maintain their creativity in whatever the next evolution of video games would be. I think, they have led their company in such a way that it allows them to exist even if things in the marketplace differentiate or differ or shift, or there's a technology shift. I think Nintendo is able to survive this at this point. Even if things ever got, like, if everybody's just like, well, we don't want to play video games anymore, I think Nintendo would somehow figure it out, maintain profitability, and, whatever the next evolution of the game industry is, I think Nintendo's going to be a part of it. And what's so interesting to me was their stubbornness and willingness to try something and commit to it, even if it is, a quote unquote failure. They are willing to try to innovate and try new things. And it's just so interesting to me. So, okay, let's backpedal here. The Nintendo Wii comes out and it launches against HD consoles. So it's an underpowered piece of hardware that has a gimmick. And a gimmick, I don't mean like, oh, this is silly. I mean like in the actual definition of the word, just like a unique selling point. So you have your motion technology, and even though it didn't have HD, because HD, TVs didn't quite take off at the time, they released a souped up two GameCubes, duct taped together. But they released them against HD based consoles with more power. And in the short term, so the first 2 to 3 years of the Wii's life cycle, it sold like gangbusters. It was the right decision. The biggest downside was they banked on not needing a powerful console and not needing HD. And that aged this hardware and the next hardware, which is the Wii U, immensely and quickly, unlike anything that I've ever seen. So cell phones, hardware, PCs in the past like decade have gone through such a jump in power, even for like the low cost hardware parts, that I don't think anyone was expecting. And I think it's finally starting to like cool down now, where I don't think, in the next 5 years you're going to see a shift in the hardware power immensely impacting video games like it has in the past, from the jump from 2D to 3D to 3D to HD, and to where we're at now with like 4K and everything like that. So the Wii aged horribly, but I literally remember being in Walmart and seeing a sign, and it said, at Christmas time, please, dear customers, please only purchase, we will only allow one purchase of one Wii console per family to ensure that everyone has a good Christmas, just like typed up at a Walmart hanging on the thing. And I'm just like, holy smokes. Like, this thing is hard to find. So Nintendo basically couldn't keep that thing in stock, for a while. And it also accessed a group of people that aren't gamers. And I think that kind of stayed within the game industry. I think they tapped into it. And I think ultimately, your non-traditional gamers, so family members, or, people that nowadays might only play Call of Duty. So like your more casual based gamers, like I play Call of Duty. Cool. That's the only game they play. Or I play Fortnite, or I play Minecraft, or I play games on my phone. I play Candy Crush. I think Nintendo was able to tap into that and expose people to what video games are. And that stayed because I feel like the amount of consoles and games sold and different types of games, like people will just play Minecraft and that's all they play, and they'll play it on whatever platform they have. Whereas your more traditional hardcore gamers, they buy a console or they buy a gaming PC and they play like all kinds of video games in different genres and everything like that. So those people still exist, and I still think they're the core, they're the backbone. That's the group you really want to target. But I also think that Nintendo was able to kind of tap into that market of like, look at this, grandma can play Wii tennis with you. You know what I mean? But that console aged quickly. And in, I think it was like 2009, 2010, Wii sales were slowing down. There wasn't great third party support. Your third party support was like Just Dance and like kind of that crowd where you don't need a powerful console, where that game might sell, really well. I think Ubisoft had a lot of success with Just Dance and everything like that. But it was in genres of games where it's not going to translate to the hardcore crowd, meaning the hardware is so underpowered, you can't just put an Xbox 360 or a PS3 game on the Wii. It just wasn't possible. So Nintendo kind of found themselves in a boat of, hey, we got this first party content, our games are selling well, but third parties are like, listen, I can't go make an exclusive Wii game that's like, dedicated to hardcore audiences, like Red Steel, for example, which I think was a Wii launch game, but Red Steel 1 sold like 1 million copies or something like that, and it was a hardcore like, hey, you're shooting, you're swinging a sword, everything's looking cool. Then Red Steel 2 just sold like 10,000 copies. So you started seeing that a lot, where just the third party support was drying up, sales were slowing down. At one point, I think the Wii, there was even there was like different versions of the console, but things like new Super Mario Brothers was selling well, like Wii Sports obviously was selling well, things like that were doing really good, but they weren't able to tap into that third party support. And honestly, if you're only one company supporting the bulk of the software, that makes it really hard, because ultimately you want to have a console where you have your independent developers, you have your large third-party publishers and developers that want to make and sell the games on those consoles. And if it's sold, so Batman Arkham Asylum comes out and sells really well on the PS3 and Xbox 360, if the Wii was capable of running that game or having HD, etc., and also sold equally, that would be great. But it just wasn't happening. So Nintendo found themselves in a spot where they started talking about basically an HD Wii, or hey, they started looking at thoughts of this. And this is kind of where the Wii U idea started coming from and came into. So the Wii and the Nintendo DS were their two consoles during that time frame, and they were just rolling in money. I think the Wii ended up selling over 100 million units, which is insane. But keep in mind, that was like mainly in the first 70%, mainly 50, but like 70% of the life cycle of the Wii. It tailed off pretty substantially then afterwards. And the Nintendo DS is the second best-selling console of all time. Listen, I think it could edge out the PS2. I don't know how accurate those numbers are, but it's like 154 million units to the 155-ish million units of the PS2. So it's neck and neck there. But keep in mind, cell phones weren't as popular as they are then. So I think a lot of the market was like, hey, portable entertainment. And what I think Nintendo was seeing at the time was, hey, the technology is getting so much better. Our long-term view is we release a portable because you can kind of like take your games on the go, but the hardware, due to cost and having to put screens in it and everything like that, is going to be less powerful. So the Game Boy line evolved into the DS, and it was more powerful than the Game Boy, but in retrospect, when you compare it to like consoles, it was significantly underpowered. And it's hard to kind of, if you make a $250 console that doesn't have a screen, you don't have to put a screen in it. That eliminates like, geez Louise, probably what, 30 to 40% of the cost at the time. And the DS had two screens on it. So in terms of sales and software sales, the Wii and the Nintendo DS were just absolutely incredible. Like Nintendo was able to bank so much money that they could have failed for like generations in a row and still, maintain their organization. So that was kind of, an interesting time where they have to transition out of that now. And since their console aged to the point where third party developers basically can't publish content on it, there had to be an HD console that they would release. And that ended up being the Wii U. But now Nintendo, as always, is very innovative and creative, and they are willing to experiment and find new ways to play, that the Wii U also came with a gimmick. Now, I have some personal stories to share with the launch of the Wii U, and one kind of story that happened in particular, I remember on like, the launch window. So this is probably like the first month or two of the launch of the Wii U, and just kind of like how people viewed it, your average person. So the Wii U was Nintendo's next console. And when you look at the Wii U in comparison to the Xbox 360 and the PS3, it's more in line in terms of power with those consoles. It's more powerful. I believe it had, like twice as much RAM or four times as much RAM as those consoles. And keep in mind, the Xbox 360 and the PS3, by the end of their life cycle, man, they were running on fumes. That hardware was underpowered and aged quickly due to what we talked about earlier, where basically processing power was like doubling every year. And graphical power was like doubling every year, and the amount of RAM you would see in computers was 4 gigs, 8 gigs, 16 gigs. Like you could just like kind of soup it up. So it was aging so quickly, and the average life cycle of a video game console was like 5 years, up until the Xbox 360 and PS3 and Wii, where that was like, geez, like a decade for the Xbox 360 and PS3. Felt like forever. Those were just sold way too long. Well, it's good because, you don't have to, parents aren't going to be like, oh, what do you mean I got to get the new Xbox? I just bought an Xbox 5 years ago. This is ridiculous. Like, what's the difference? I don't understand it. That's always been a problem in the gaming industry, which is like really funny. It's like, well, no, it plays new games and it's more powerful. And like, a lot of times parents just don't understand it. Like getting a computer for some reason is different in their minds, but basically they're just computers. That's literally all they are. And it's even, the lines are even more blurred at this point. But the Wii U had a controller that had a screen on it, a 480p screen. Okay. And you had to be within range of the actual Wii U console. And I remember at the launch of the Wii U, when they showed the showcase of the third-party games that were going to be like launch titles and what they were putting on it, I remember literally jumping up and like put my hands in the air. I'm like, finally, you're going to be able to play these games on a Nintendo console. Like, this is awesome. And Reggie Fils-Aimé, who was the American president, or the president of Nintendo America, excuse me, was getting grilled on it because it's like all they were showing was the gamepad, and the gamepad was interesting. So it's like, hey, is the gamepad the console? Like, what is the Wii U? And in everybody's defense, I think Nintendo was trying to showcase the experience, and I think what they needed to do, and I know kind of why they didn't, maybe, was say, here is the total Wii U console. Here is the gamepad. This is what it does. These are the specs. I honestly, I think, I understand, like, you want to get away from specs and everything like that, but you have to acknowledge it because it is important to the game industry. Like, what can this run? What are we expecting out of this? And honestly, in terms of power, it was very similar to the Xbox 360 and PS3. The Wii U launched in 2013. And, a year later, the PS4 was launching. That's a problem because the PS4, soon as the PS4 is announced, it's 10 times the console of the Wii U. So now we're in the same boat where they released an aged console. Now, is it a jump up in power to the Wii? Yes, but that's not saying much. You know what I mean? So several things happened with the announcement and launch of the Wii U. There's a lot of confusion. because, Reggie Fils-Aimé is getting grilled at the launch, and they're like, well, what is the console? And I remember him saying, well, you don't have to worry about the console. Like, it's just the box. And, he's being interviewed and they're grilling him like, oh, it's just a box. It doesn't matter. Like, everybody's kind of, taking his words out of context. But that innovation and thought process that it is just a box, right? So the Wii U had two components. You had your physical console, which looked pretty cool. It was like a snappier looking Wii box, basically. And then you had your gamepad, which had the screen, and it was a controller built in. It looked like a lot like a Nintendo Switch. And ultimately, Nintendo had to release the Wii U to get to the Nintendo Switch, right? So you're coming off the sales of the Wii, the expectations of the Wii, the hype of having an HD Nintendo console, and then the rug being pulled out from under you with the naming, with what it was, because there was so much confusion from a consumer's perspective too, because it's like, is this a brand new console, or is this an HD Wii? If it's an HD Wii, it's like, oh, okay, cool. So you're going to have an HD version, because all the Wii accessories were compatible with the Wii U as well. So there's just so much confusion. It did run Blu-ray discs, I believe, or some type of like modified Blu-ray. So like you could fit all of the games on a disc, which was huge, because I think the Wii had the limitations of DVD due to the non HD and everything like that. So what the size of the game that you could actually fit on the disc was also a giant improvement over the Wii U. But the story that I have that kind of encompasses the launch of the Wii U and the confusion in the marketplace, and maybe why, like, what was it? So like, what was this targeted towards? Was it targeted towards hardcore gamers? Well, guess what? They're going to buy a PS4 and Xbox, One or whatever the heck it was called, because it's going to have all the games on it. Those games are probably not going to be ported, real time over to the Wii U due to the lack of power, or it's going to be a butchered version. So now we're in the same exact boat with third-party support. So it's like, okay, that's a drawback. The naming, Wii to Wii U. Okay. So is this an enhancement? Is it going to match, the PS4 and the Xbox One? Well, no. Okay, so is it just a placeholder for a couple of years? Kind of like how, every year or every other year they'll make a PlayStation Slim, or like an updated version of that, which might have like a slightly better processor, or maybe some more RAM, or a Pro version now. They have like the PS4 Pro. So a lot of confusion on to what the heck this was, and Nintendo didn't do a great job of explaining it. But I was working at Best Buy at the time, and I worked in like computers and everything like that, but I don't think we had anybody specifically for the gaming department. But, if you'd see somebody standing over there, you just walk up to them, hey, you have any questions? And I'll never forget, this is like literally the stereotype of like, Nintendo's going to have so much confusion for, your generic soccer mom, parent, blah, blah, blah. And this was it. This was, a mom who wanted to buy something for Christmas, didn't want to spend a lot of money, but wanted to have something fun for like their kids to open up, right? And what we had on the shelf at the time was a Nintendo Wii, so a $99 Just Dance bundle for a Nintendo Wii. So it was $99 total and came with Just Dance, and this was like during the craze of everybody just wanted to dance, right? And it was $99, and there was a deluxe Wii U version, which I think was $299 or $349. I want to say it was $349, and it came with Nintendo Land, and it came with 32 gigabytes of space on it. You can do memory cards and all of that stuff. So basically, if you were going to download anything, you wanted to get the deluxe set, and you probably needed a memory card. But it's $349. And she was like, what's the difference between these? Like, what is a Wii U? I don't understand this. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I'm like, well, hey, it's Nintendo's new console. It's HD. It's this. It's that. It comes with the gamepad. She's looking at the prices. And she's like, well, we just want to play like a dancing game. So, like, does it help you dance better? Like, is it better for what we're doing? And I'm looking at both. She's like, is the $200 to $250 more from the two products that I'm looking at make a difference for my purchase? And I just remember like laughing, like she kind of got me to pause. I'm just like, ha, I'm like, yeah, based upon what you're selling, my recommendation is actually the Nintendo Wii because everything you said, like you're gonna be $400 to $450 for the game, the Wii U, and you just want to dance, and this is $99 and it dances. She's like, yeah, that's fine for me, and I'm like, wow. So I'm like looking at this Christmas purchase, and I'm like, yeah, for a family console that you're gonna throw in the living room and play like dancing and whoever knows what else, like that is $100 gift that all the kids can share and have a good time with, and plays the game just fine, right? And I just kind of saw myself, and I'm like, oh, this is gonna be a problem. And this was the launch quarter, I think, that it launched, and I was like, wow. And I remember on launch day, my friend also worked at Best Buy at the time, and I think there was like one or two other people. Like we literally grabbed the Wii U Deluxe, set it aside, grabbed like 4 or 5 games. I think I bought Mass Effect 3, Assassin's Creed. I don't know. I had a handful of games, but it was like this is already going to be a problem. So you have your two crowds. You have your hardcore crowd. They buy lots of video games every year. They play different types of games. They're probably not going to buy it because it's not really like a new console, and the games that are being released, Nintendo was going to third parties and saying like, hey, look, you can release your games here. But what was going to be released was Xbox 360 and PS3 games. Uh-oh. Those are like 8-year-old consoles at this point. And then the PS4 is like, look at how awesome this is. And you're like, oh my God, that thing, you can't put a PS4 game on a Wii U easily. You know what I mean? Like there's going to be significant downgrades. They're going to have to rebuild it up. So it's not going to be a launch title at the same time it launches on the PS4. So third parties are mad. Your hardcore gaming crowd's mad. Your casual, hey, I want to buy this for my family, they don't understand it. So I'm like, holy smokes. I really didn't think the naming of it was going to be bad. Honestly, I don't know. Because like with attaching the Wii name to it, the benefit is while the launch of the Wii name when the Wii console came out was met with just what the heck, and the spelling was weird, everything was just weird about it. But eventually it grew over time and became a brand. It became a recognized, brand. So that's the good thing, right? The bad thing is now people think it's because it wasn't called the Wii 2, they don't know what it is. I don't know if Nintendo knew what it was. Like, I don't know if I knew what it was. Like, looking back on it, it's kind of funny because at the time I'm like, well, it's Nintendo's new console. Like, this is their next console for the next 5 or so years, right? But it didn't feel like it. Like you look at the graphical enhancements and how the Wii U basically mirrored the previous Xbox and the previous PlayStation 3. So it's like, what is this? What is Nintendo's mindset with this? What is their idea with it? They're in trouble. And just from a sales perspective, and then we'll kind of like break down what the Wii was and how it was, what happened with it, I guess, right? Is it put Nintendo in a unique situation now where they have another console that is underpowered, and do they know what this is, right? So during this time, Nintendo also had a new iteration and ran into the same exact problems with their Nintendo 3DS. So I think the Nintendo 3DS might have released the following year. I think it might have been 2014. I didn't pull up information on that one because I wanted to focus a little bit more on some of like the Wii U characteristics and some things that are forever lost to time that nobody will ever know because, part of having the internet is if a company shuts down servers or discontinues a service, it's gone forever. And if you didn't experience it at the time, you can literally never experience it ever again. And I do think the Wii U had some really cool ideas that were, service based or software based that actually didn't come to the Nintendo Switch, and they're just gone. And if you didn't have a Wii U at launch or at the time, you just missed out on this cool experience, and Nintendo just did away with it forever. So very, interesting time. So I'm going to grab a drink here. But what's interesting here is they released their Wii U, so it's like, okay, I loved the announcement of it because it was them getting caught back up and focusing on third-party support and hardcore support. So I was pumped, right? So that's the positive. The negative is now we have an aged console already. The PS4 and Xbox One get announced and come out, and you're like, Nintendo is the next 5 years are going to be the same as the last 3 years of the Wii, which, weren't great. They had an underpowered console, third party support was limited. They're in the same boat. Their portable console, the Nintendo DS, 150 plus million units sold, absolutely insane. Software selling like crazy, like it was just nuts. I love the Nintendo DS. Nintendo 3DS launches, high price point, $250, a 3D screen, right? So you already have another gimmick. So you have your Wii U gamepad, you have your 3DS screen, so 3D without glasses, expensive console, and just the 3DS kind of faltered at launch too. So Nintendo went from having their, I want to say, their two, at the time it was definitely their two best selling consoles of all time, to and then going to what you would consider failed launches based upon previous success is just an insane time, right? So the Nintendo 3DS was expensive, it's $249, and I think after 3 to 6 months they cut the price down. And what's really cool is if you bought it at launch and had the 3DS, they gave you ambassador games. So they gave you like 10, I think it was downloadable games, and they gave you a little app on your 3DS where if you downloaded it, you were an ambassador and you have like a little ribbon. And they gave you like 10 Game Boy Advance games or something like that they never released on an eShop, which was also, just a side note, a crazy thing to do. But it was cool. So like I think they brought it down to $189, and they were like, "Hey, our bad. Here's this." So Nintendo already kind of found themselves in a unique situation where it's like we have two gimmicks slash selling points that didn't catch on. We have two consoles now that are significantly lesser, and they had to work their butts off. They turned the 3DS around, but it sold, I think, half of what the DS did. So that was kind of like a kick in the pants for them, but it was a great console as well. But the Wii U integrated some really unique ideas that are basically just gone forever. And one of them was Miiverse. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about the Wii U and some of the things that I think that it did just amazingly well. So the gamepad was cool. The screen on it was 480p, but it was small. So and what was cool though is you could actually play games on it. So you could press a button and the console would basically stream the game fully to the gamepad. Now, what does that sound like? Sounds like the Nintendo Switch. So the Wii U just basically, it had to exist from a technology perspective to get to what the Nintendo's long-term plan was, which was, hey, having two consoles is kind of a pain in the butt. Now we have all of our development teams working on two sets of hardware. The two sets of hardware, by the way, also have different capabilities. They also have unique features that make them unique. So like you can't just develop a Wii U game and port it over to the 3DS. And if you did, like what's the point of having two consoles at this point? So Nintendo's long-term vision was these experiences with the way technology is going need merged. And they saw something that nobody else saw in the industry where there was a hankering for it, which ultimately was a hardcore gaming console with an amazing software library, decent power, you can kind of argue power, but having the portability of you can play it on a TV and you can pick it up and play it on the go. The downside is the Wii U couldn't do that. So the ideas and the creativity were there. And I remember having a Wii U and you could be in the same room as long as there was basically direct line of sight to the console and you could play your game. So I remember playing Mass Effect 3, which, keep in mind, the Mass Effect 3, it had already launched, I think, on... I'm looking at my games here. I think it was an Xbox 360 title originally. I believe so. I'm going to say yes to that. So it was an Xbox 360 and PS3 title and was ported over. Oh, yes, I remember this now. Because the Mass Effect collection came out, but the Nintendo Wii U didn't get it. All they got was Mass Effect 3. So your third-party support was already butchered because it's like, okay, cool, I can get the Mass Effect collection with all three titles for how much? $30? On better hardware? Oh, okay. How much is it on the Wii U? Oh, it's $60 for just Mass Effect 3. Cool, I've never played Mass Effect. Can I start with 3? Sure. You can start it, but you missed the two games and all the gameplay and all the years of story and like all the So Nintendo's again just in this like awkward situation with third party developers where they're getting the support, but honestly, some of these third party developers were supporting it kind of, you know, they were half butting it. And if you release just Mass Effect 3, but you also announced a collection for half the cost, you know what you're doing. That's not real third party support, and you can't be mad if the game doesn't sell. Like, that's on you. Like, Nintendo can release the hardware and get you a platform and sell copies of it. That's Nintendo's responsibility, is to kind of court third party developers by, hey, look, I made a console. We sold, 20 million of them in the first year. That we need some games, and guess what? You can make a lot of money if you sell your games on here. But to do that type of support as a third party developer or publisher, you're setting yourself up for failure. And for Nintendo, it just makes your console look bad. The cool thing, though, with Mass Effect 3 is I do remember being on, what was it? Oh my god, it was the Turian's homeworld where, so semi spoiler alert, but there's this giant galactic battle and you're on their homeworld and you're on a moon or something like that. You're in space and like you're fighting this battle and like you see this giant space battle happening up above and you're just like, whoa, and looking at it on this little screen and you're like, this is cool. Like, I can play the game fully on this gamepad. There is something to this concept here of being able to play this game on this console on just the gamepad. There's something cool there. Like, I remember looking at Mass Effect 3 and I uploaded a screenshot of it to the Miiverse, which we're going to talk about here shortly. But I was like, this is just really cool. Now it's 480p, so you're like already kind of like, okay, so that's kind of, something that you're dealing with there is you don't have HD display, and it does make a difference. Like, I'm just going to tell you straight up, having an HD screen, even on a portable, like, just makes a huge difference. You can tell 480p to 720p to 1080p. You can say, oh, your eyes don't realize it, but yeah, I'm telling you right now, if I have an HD screen and a non-HD screen, you can immediately tell. Like, you can see the technology difference. You can see the resolution difference, period. I'm not even gonna like debate or entertain that argument. Like, I see it with my eyes. On my TV, Mass Effect 3 looks a lot better. On this little 480p screen, it doesn't look as good. And I'm gonna die here. Maybe it was 720p. I can't remember, but man, I should have looked that up. I feel like I might have to pause now, but I remember it not being HD. So hold on here. I am going to pause real quick to check. Okay, we are back. It was 480p. I was starting to sweat there. I was like, this is all based upon memory, like everything I'm talking about. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was 720p and I'm being silly here. No, so it was 480p. And I think the 3DS, just as a side note, was half of that. It was like 240p. But then there was technically, like, when you did the 3D, there was like two displays. So it's kind of like interesting. But long story short, the concept, my game is being played on the gamepad. I remember, like, I'm like, dang, I like this. This is a concept that I like. Here is the problem with the Wii U. You walk in the next room, you can't do it anymore. And I even had it set up where if I wasn't basically in direct line of sight, like even if I was only like, 7 to 10 feet away, if I went around a corner or anything like that, you just couldn't play it on the gamepad. And I'm like, man, okay. So there's severe limitations to this, and I don't understand it. The second thing that happened that was unique during the consoles of that time, so the Xbox One had this as well, was they were trying to integrate TV integration, so TV integration during that time with the Xbox One and Wii U, where and I'm surprised this happened, but it's just one of those things that occurred in the video game industry where I feel like the game companies thought that having a console be a part of the home entertainment system was going to be essential. And I just don't think that happened. And that's just due to technology and like streaming and everything like that. Like you don't necessarily need a Blu-ray player, or a game console that also controls your TV. So the gamepad, it's kind of cool. Like, you could pair what TV brand you had with it, and you could change the channel, I think change input, change volume, etc. I think Microsoft went even further where like your cable line could run into the Xbox and then into the TV to like fully integrate it and everything like that. And I don't think that took off mainly because streaming really jumped up over the next 10 years and became prominent to the point where, like, my TV has, streaming built into it. Like, all the apps are a part of it. The technology kind of outgrew that very quickly. So it was something kind of cool that the gamepad could do, but I don't think consumers were going to buy this and be like, yeah, this will change the volume of my TV and I'm always going to turn this on first. It was like, it was cool that it could do it, but it was retired pretty quickly. It wasn't really utilized. And I don't know if Sony really did much with that, but streaming kind of took over. So it was like that part of the integration wasn't essential. And maybe some of the thought processes with that took away from the core experience of what the product needed to be. You know what I mean? So, once again, to highlight, you could play games and stream them to the gamepad. Awesome. Walk around the corner, bad. But then Nintendo did a few other things during that time that are just gone. And one of them was Miiverse. So they kind of marketed and treated it as like a social media platform. So you could post on Miiverse, and it was a fully integrated online community basically. And it was broken down by like game and all this stuff. So new Super Mario Brothers U, which is a great game by the way, and I think it got a Switch port, but the Switch port was just missing like the soul of what the original was. So you could be playing a game, so new Mario launches, right? You could share stamps, you could post live, you could draw pictures. You would be on the world map and like going to level 1-1 and posts about that level after completing it. Like people would say, hey, search here for this or do this, or like, oh, this was an awesome one, you'll love it. Like when you fired up the game, you would see the little me characters like standing around on the map and like their posts like popping up regarding the level. And it was just so unique. So I understand that Nintendo has a way of kind of doing things the Nintendo way. And really what you're asking for is like, hey, I want an easy way to play online games and talk with people. Like I want to have, game chats, which once you have that integrated into the console or PC, like, it just makes life so much easier. So if you use like Discord or something like that, just like, hey, here, we're going to jump in here and this is where we're going to chat. You want your hardware to have either Discord as an option since it's already established and like so popular, or you want to basically make it so easy, like, hey, join my party, and you can immediately start chatting and go into a game. You know what I mean? And that's where Nintendo struggled. So that was kind of the ask, but then they created something that had like so much unique soul. So you would like turn the game on or the console on, you'd see like all these Mii characters, so you could switch it between like your apps and like the games that you're playing and like your screen. But then there was like all these like characters and they were like all talking. So like people would make their Mii characters and they would like show up in different games when you're online and show up on that platform like, hey, everybody's like talking, and that was their message. It felt communal, and I outside of playing a specific game, I don't think anything like this has existed where just turning on the console felt like a community. Now, Nintendo also had, this might have been on the 3DS. I can't remember. It was something that was integrated with Miiverse. It was basically Swap Note, I think it was called. And I think that might have been on both. But during this time, they also made that where, you could talk with people and send drawings and everything back and forth. And of course, soon as people started messaging minors in Japan, that ended that. Nintendo basically shut that service off. So there was like this other cool thing where Nintendo just makes it so unique. And like I remember, I think it was Swap Note was the name of it, but they made like a little character, and she was kind of like the Swap Note mascot, and they just like shut it down, and so that's gone. And the same thing with Miiverse. So from firing up, being able to see live messages in New Super Mario Brothers U, or go into Miiverse and click a game that you're playing like Mass Effect 3, and you could upload screenshots like from the gamepad and stuff and like make notes. It was so unique and cool to see like a live community. Now, keep in mind, Nintendo basically did allocate employees specifically to monitor chats and everything like that. So it was pretty heavily regulated. So it was PG. So it wasn't perfect, and like if somebody reported your message, they were probably just taking it down because it was easier than actually, having employees read through these and everything like that. But it was so cool. And like every game had a little community with it, and then you had like your overall Wii U community. And eventually Nintendo shut it down. So 2017, I think the launch of the Switch, this just died. And guess what the Switch has? The Switch has no way, no easy way to chat, no backgrounds. Like there's still two backgrounds on the Switch, and now they're already talking about the Switch 2. There's the black background and the white background. It's super just like basic. They never made themes. They never did this. Like their online components, their way to chat with people, like Miiverse, nothing transitioned over. So kind of what was happening with Nintendo, and like this is a gaming lost memory basically, is if you didn't experience that at the time, what's unique about the modern video game industry is if it is a service-based thing that a company has to run on servers, once they shut it down, it's gone. And the same thing with the eShop. So, and specifically with the Virtual Console, the Wii U had one of the best, if not the best, Virtual Console of all time. You could play, I think, even some DS games. I think there was Wii games you could download, Game Boy games, like, and you could buy them, and you didn't have to be a Nintendo Switch Online member. So the way they're doing it now is you can't just go in and buy, Ocarina of Time. You can go in, and if you're an online member, you can go in and play it, which honestly, like, it is what it is. That's cool. But it was really cool being able to just download and own and play. But guess what? Now it's stuck to that Wii U console. They did DS emulation. Like, they really went all out. So if you ended up owning a Wii U, you had this, like, just weird first party online, you could post Miiverse posts to, I think they integrated like Facebook and Twitter and everything with it. Like Nintendo had an idea, and this was their most online community based console ever. So during this time, the Wii U and the 3DS just had this like communal based soul that you could feel. And once they shut it down, it's gone forever. And they didn't bring it to the Switch. And guess what? They no longer have two consoles out. It's just one piece of hardware now. But I also remember during this time, I think the best selling game was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So to kind of put this into perspective, just to kind of show you the weird sandwich of eras that Nintendo was in during this time, the Wii, 100 plus million units sold. The Wii U, like 13 million. And then they had to discontinue it, and they were just like, listen, we're focusing on whatever our new console is. So that is substantially, that's, from a company perspective, there's two things that you can look at. Because ultimately, they're a publicly traded company, and Nintendo has a duty to their shareholders and their stakeholders. So anybody that's involved with Nintendo, either financially or, their company's decisions have an impact on their lives, in some way, like a stakeholder or a shareholder, like you have a financial responsibility to your shareholders. And this was a unique time because basically what you have to say is, hey, we sold 100 million consoles before and 155 or 154 million, Nintendo DS units. And now we didn't do that. We sold 13 million, and our best-selling game was 8 million copies of Mario Kart 8. Mario Kart 8 is amazing, by the way. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the Switch is like the souped-up version with extra courses and like all the characters and stuff. That sold over 60 million copies. That just kind of puts into perspective like where Nintendo was during this time. Is like they're running a roller coaster, like it's just going up and up and up, and like everything's looking good, and then they just, there's no more track left, and all of a sudden it's just a drop off, and they're in this situation where they're being creative, they're trying to innovate, but it just didn't equate to sales. Third parties also, like you had a lot of third party games and everything on it, but once again it was, you would only have one version of a game like Mass Effect 3 Or you would have Assassin's Creed 3, but it kind of didn't, run that great. And it's, I don't know if it ran Assassin's Creed 4. That would be interesting if it did. I don't recall. I remember playing Assassin's Creed 3 on it. But, new games coming out on, the PS4 and Xbox One just were not going to come out on the Wii U. Some of them did, sure, but it just, the hardware power was so substantially different that it just, wasn't a possibility. So, and losing the Miiverse and SwapNote and all of these cool features, and then of course the Virtual Console. Once again, Nintendo not having a core online platform that carries over to consoles was just weird. Like now it's just everything's just like stuck in every console they're starting fresh with, including the Wii U and the 3DS were also separated at this time. Nintendo's president at the time, Satoru Iwata, he is an absolute legend. I think I read his quote before where he's like, my title is president. On my business card it says this, and in my heart, I'm a gamer. He is just so. All of the Nintendo executives, the higher ranking ones, himself included, took a massive salary cut to ensure there were no layoffs during that time. And basically, what they were issuing was like, "Hey, we are going to get through this. We are not going to lay anyone off. We are not going to change our company. We're not going to make short-term layoff decisions and hurt our company in the long term because we have so much talent and like we want people to be creative. And you can't be creative if there's constant layoffs in your company because all you're thinking of is me next. And you're just living your day to day. You're not looking at a project like, hey, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to develop the next Zelda. Oh, I might not have a job next month, so like I'm not even thinking of trying something wild or being creative or putting my all into this piece of art that I'm creating that will hopefully equate to a product that sells. And it was just such an interesting time. The Wii U also had a lot of really cool like remakes. Like they had, man, can we please get a Wind Waker remake? They had Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, which were they're kind of stuck on that console. And I'm trying to think of where. Oh my gosh, what was Skyward Sword? Was that on the Wii? I honestly, man, I can't remember. We're going to do a separate Zelda podcast. A couple of episodes that I have banked will be talking about Zelda a little bit and then Zelda to Dark Souls. I do want to have that kind of discussion of the history of adventure games a little bit. But yeah, so playing Wind Waker, oh my gosh, I was like so happy. It was so bright. They changed the sailing, like, and you could play it on the gamepad. It honestly, it had a core, probably like 15 games where I'd be like, yo, you got to play these like Wii U games. But ultimately, the idea was there. And I think what Nintendo saw during this time, which led to where they're at now, was we have two consoles. And the hardware power of what's available in terms of chipsets and what you can make now is blurred. So cell phones, could be as powerful as a Wii U. They could run games that were, as powerful or more powerful these days. Like your cell phone technology, your iPad technology, your portable technology was strong enough to where you could have a portable or like even a laptop. Like you could have small components that were very powerful now that kind of blurred that gap. And Nintendo had so many resources, they were almost competing against themselves because, okay, hey, do we release this game that we're making for the 3DS that's probably going to sell better on the 3DS? Do we make it for the 3DS or do we just put it on the Wii U to try to like make some really great games to try to sell this thing to get this off the ground? So Nintendo has a lot of internal development teams, and they're all working on like different things. So like you can actually look up during their annual reviews where they will say, "Hey, these are the teams. This is what they're working on." It's really interesting. But two pieces of hardware. So now it's like, okay, well, we need to get software for both of these. So they're almost their internal resources were competing against themselves. So not only do you have the external pressures of I'm competing against Sony, Microsoft, I'm competing against Apple, like, you're competing against screen time. So there's only so much time, and if I'm going to allocate my time to playing a video game, why should I make it a Wii U purchase versus a PlayStation 4 purchase, or just game on my PC, or just look at social media on my phone. Honestly, like, you're kind of competing against entertainment in general, right? I do think they're different, obviously, but if I have 10 minutes to kill, am I going to look on my phone, or am I going to go and fire up my Wii U? Okay, well, hey, I'm going to fire up my Wii U and go into the next room and play. Ah, can't. But they started development of the Switch. So the Wii U, they kind of saw what was happening. They were going to support it while they could, but they were developing their new console for years, and they always do this. But it was very clear that they had a lot of ideas, they had a lot of creativity, they had a lot of innovation, and Nintendo had to slog through this. They had to travel through this swamp in this time where a lot of great games came out. The Wii U had great games. The 3DS had great games. The 3DS, I think, ended up selling like 70 or 80 million units. So from the initial launch to what they turned it into was great. But the downside was is they did have to discount the hardware. They did have to deal with a 3DS screen, a 3D screen that technology didn't take off and wasn't going to carry over. Then they had separate eShops. They saw the long term, and the long term was going to be what the Nintendo Switch became. And Satoru Iwata, this is, he is just a legend in the gaming community, and I think he will always have a historical part of what he did with Nintendo and where he got them. He was working on the ideas of the Nintendo Switch at the time, and I don't have all the details of that, but he passed before the launch of the Nintendo Switch. And it was sad because he I think he was young. He was 50s or 60s. But you started hearing about his health concerns, his health issues, and he wasn't able to do the Nintendo Directs, which I don't think they called them the Nintendo Directs, but he wasn't able to like record those videos. And I remember I'm gonna have to see his last one. I remember he appeared on one of them, and you could physically tell he was ill, and that this had taken a toll on him just with his speaking voice and like his physical appearance and everything like that. And him taking, I think he took a 50% pay cut to ensure that they weren't laying off. And like, when you have all these external pressures and your company is not doing well over a 5-year period in comparison to how they were doing before, it's hard not to say, okay, well, we're restructuring, we're going to kick this out, we're going to lay off people. Like, he's like, no, my pay will be impacted. And the Japanese, there's a lot of pride and personal accountability where, if you're running a company, it's a little bit different than America, I would say. You'll have the golden parachute. They'll leave. They'll cut employees. It's very common for large companies, especially tech companies, to just lay people off and like, hey, we're restructuring, we're laying you off. Here's a severance package. Goodbye. And to not do that during that time, to see the long-term vision and to believe in your overall message and to see the future, it was very noble. And it doesn't happen in business a lot, but it's more common in Japanese companies for sure. And to impact your life and your pay, regardless if you're a CEO or you're a president or like whatever you are, like ultimately, could you imagine, a CEO of a company in America just saying, hey, we're not going to lay anyone off, but I am going to take a significant reduction in pay to get us through this. You're not going to see that. Like, it's not going to happen. And that's what he did. And him passing before the insane success of the Switch, it gets me like choked up because it's like you were right, like your vision, your Nintendo's creativity, like your projects you were leading, like the consolidation to one piece of hardware, like you had the right ideas, like it was. And now it's just like, seeing the Mario movie be successful, seeing the Pokemon IP be just the biggest intellectual property on the planet, just like seeing how every single one of their franchises, like the best-selling version of the game, is on the Switch. Like, whether it's Mario Kart or Animal Crossing or just Mario in general or Zelda or, the rebirth of Metroid, and Metroid, selling millions of copies again. And it's just hard to know that he missed out on that. and that this was like, where he was going, because the Nintendo Switch would not exist without the Wii U. There had to be a branch, there had to be something in between, because the 10-year period there, the technology just shifted. And while Nintendo might have gambled or bet or not read the market conditions correctly with the Wii U, man, did they see the long term correctly. And like, so where are we at now, right? The Nintendo Switch, it outsold the Wii. It's possibly, maybe, going to be the best selling game console of all time. It's the third right now. And it has the ability and the capabilities of getting there. To see their software units, just, it's insane. Like every single one of their intellectual properties, the best selling version or the best selling game of the franchise is on the Switch. To see Animal Crossing go from this cool niche, like, hey, this is cool, and like, it'll sell really well, but I don't even know. I think the Wild World might have been the best selling, and it was millions of units, but it wasn't like 40 or 50 million. To see Splatoon, to see Mario Party, to see the Pokemon games like sell 30 million units each, like, it's just so crazy to see their success and to see their vision come through. And ultimately where we're at now, like, I remember them announcing the Nintendo Switch, and it was just perfect. The Wii U launch led to confusion from media outlets to people to gamers, just everybody, to see how concise they were with their messaging. It was funny. Nintendo didn't mess around. They're like, we're going to show you the Nintendo Switch, and we're going to show you the same thing again and again and again, and the use cases. Because I remember the launch, they showed people playing it, and then it's attached to the TV on a dock, and then you click the controllers into it, you pick it up, and you go. And then you can take the controllers off, and you can play it on the console, and you can play it on the TV, and it plays the same both ways. And it's got an HD screen. And they just said, hey, there's not going to be two consoles. It's a home console and it's a portable console, all in one. And like it's kind of funny. You go from their eShops, or whatever you want to call them, are kind of fragmented and all over the place, and there's no like third party games and blah, to now like literally the Nintendo Switch runs like literally everything except, I think, I don't know, like Call of Duty might not be on it, but everything is on it. Like, they're just, the eShop is just out of control. It's almost like too much. It almost needs a little bit of quality control, because there's just thousands of games on it now. And just to see that, and anything that gets released on it automatically has a base of people that wants to play it. I exclusively play something like silly like Diablo 3. I have casually played on my Switch for however many years it's been released. Like, I still play it. And just to see, like Minecraft's on it and all these other third parties and the indie developers, like all of their games saw fresh light on the Switch. Like, they just, cool, here's a new, it's just amazing to see what it is. It was so successful. And honestly, like, the past 10 to 12 years, the Switch was probably their long-term vision of like, hey, this is where it's going to be. Like, we're going to blur those lines, and all of their internal development teams are working on one console now. And there's just so many first party games. Like, they're just absolutely crushing it. Like Zelda Breath of the Wild. There's two mainline Zelda games. They both sold 1 billion copies. There's a mainline Mario game. There's 2 mainline Pokemon games. Animal Crossing, Metroid, like Luigi's Mansion. I forgot about Luigi's Mansion 3. Sold like 30 million copies. Mario Kart. It's just absolutely crazy. And it's so successful. And I don't want to say perfect, because nothing's perfect, but I love the Nintendo Switch. And it's so successful that all I want is a Nintendo Switch 2. I don't even want anything fancy. I just want, increased power, throw some themes on there, maybe some more online functionality. Cool. I'm game. Give me backwards compatibility. Like, I'm ready for whatever the next Nintendo Switch is. Maybe a slightly better hardware, better screen. Like, it's just, they have created like the ultimate game console, and it was kind of, they were like it was almost like a rebirth. they had to slog through this awkward time. And this was still during the time of when Nintendo had ups and downs. So you'd have your Nintendo, your Super Nintendo. Oh, the 64. Uh-oh, Nintendo's selling less. The GameCube. Oh, they only sold 22 million units. They're failing. Then the Wii came out and the DS came out. It's like ups and downs, like these high highs and these, awkwardly low and hard to explain lows, to now where they've corrected basically, like, most of their complaints outside of, I would say, online play is still, something that they need to kind of like focus on, maybe integrate, Twitch into it. But if anything, or not, yeah, Twitch and Discord into it, but anything you do with that, you might have to pay them. So I kind of understand that. But just to kind of see, their transition from the Wii U into what it was, and keeping the core concept of the gamepad, and just being able to play it anywhere on the go. Like, you can just press it and boom, your game loads up. It's like, oh, awesome. I'm going to continue playing exactly where I left off. Oh, I want to play on the TV. Click it right in and it works. But Nintendo just had to go through what the Wii U was, and I think it's going to be, I think it's their worst selling console ever, unless you count the Virtual Boy. Maybe I'm honestly, I'd have to check. I think the Virtual Boy sold less, but their worst selling console ever. Their worst. I don't. You want to call it a failure? I think objectively, there's several different categories you could place it as a failure and just kind of move on. But they had to go through that period, and what stinks is the Wii U had so much innovation and good games that are kind of like stuck on that console. Now, Nintendo has done a great job of trying to port most of their games over, but hey, give me Twilight Princess and give me Wind Waker HD. I definitely do want those. Give us Xenoblade Chronicles X, a few of the other games that were kind of still stuck on that console. But I would like for Nintendo to, if possible, kind of revisit Miiverse in particular, and that online functionality that was done in their own way, where it gave a communal feel, where I think Sony tried to copy that with like PlayStation, I think it was Home or something like that, where you could view other people streaming live. It did it in a way that felt like it was a gaming experience. And I've never felt that since. There's never been a product or a service or where I turn something on. The only thing that's kind of similar, maybe 10% of it, is like I was playing Elden Ring recently, and you connect online to online servers, and you'll see like ghosts of players playing in the community, and like that's cool. Like, you see like a live person over there, and you're like, oh, they're going through an experience of fighting this hard boss like I am. But just the communication was just so lively and interesting. And it's funny that there will be people that experience something like New Super Mario Brothers U, for example, but didn't experience the soul of the game on the Wii U, and it didn't translate to the Switch. I have it on the Switch. It's a great game. You know what I mean? It's a great Mario game. I love it. And I think they saved some of like the top posts, but it's not the same to have them live and to have them updating and be able to post messages and like other people's messages. Like, yeah, I think was the official like then. It was just so amazing and so unique, and such a transitionary time for Nintendo. And to see where they're at now, like, I really do think they are Disney-esque, where you have people in my generation who have played Nintendo their entire lives and look fondly back and have nostalgia, of those properties of, of Pokemon, Mario, Zelda, Metroid, like, just all of these amazing properties that they have, that they're, building a theme park. They have, huge successful Mario movies. Like, it worked out, you know what I mean? Like, Pokemon's bigger than it's ever been. Zelda, it's kind of funny, like, just even looking at Mario versus Zelda. Mario was always mainstream, and Zelda would sell less. It would still sell really well. To, Ocarina of Time, I think, was like the best selling one. It was like 12 million copies or something like that. And Breath of the Wild just selling like 30 plus million copies, or however many copies. It's just like silly. And the new game coming out and selling like 20 million copies in a year, and you're just like, what is happening here? But it's amazing to see, and it's amazing to have lived through kind of that lost memory of people viewing Nintendo as kiddie and all of this stuff, and it's just like, that's just not really there anymore. And I feel like the Wii U had to have happened for where they're currently at. And I mean, what's funny is, even if you pick up a Wii U, you can kind of feel and experience the console, but you can't experience like Miiverse and the things that made it so unique because they shut down the services, and it's forever going to be lost to the tides of time. So it's kind of funny. Like when I look back to this one, it is like it is one of gaming's lost memories, and it's one of the reasons why I started the podcast. It's just you won't be able to experience it again, and you either lived through it and had it or you didn't. And guess what, they only sold 13 million of them, so not a lot of people experienced it. It's kind of like funny, like my children and like children growing up now, like there's just certain things they're going to experience these video games differently and without the context, and it's going to be so interesting to kind of see it and to see, where Nintendo goes from here. Like they've been so innovative. Like you go back, okay, so you have Nintendo to Super Nintendo, and we'll end on this. You have Nintendo to Super Nintendo, souped up 16-bit graphics, probably one of the biggest. It perfected 2D graphics, and it was just such a substantial jump. Like if you look at it, like the original Zelda to Link to the Past, it's so different. You know what I mean? To Super Nintendo to the Nintendo 64, 3D graphics basically for the first time. Like holy smokes! And Nintendo transitioned to 3D really well. Then you have the 64 to the GameCube, right? So this is where maybe not so much innovation, but a really solid console. And then you go from the GameCube to the Wii, massive innovation, completely different console, motion technology, a motion controller, whoa. And then to go from the Wii to the Wii U with the gamepad. So once again, another innovation. Maybe it didn't catch on, but then the Wii U to the Switch, another. It's just they always do something different. So I wonder if they are just going to say, hey, Switch 2, we're just going to ride this for another 5 years and just build upon this success. Or if they are going to try to innovate the Switch 2 into something. Historically speaking, Nintendo is always trying to push the boundaries and innovate and always have different gameplay ideas. So I don't know what they're going to do. But ultimately, just having the Wii U and for it to have existed and to ultimately have failed, that had to have had the Wii U had to exist so Nintendo could release what the Switch was, and honestly, I wish Iwata would have been able to live to see it, just because he lived through the hard time and guided that company through in a noble way to be where they're at now. So that'll wrap up this episode talking about the Nintendo Wii U and the leading to the Nintendo Switch. So this was another episode of Gaming's Lost Memory. This is BigReed signing off, and I hope you enjoyed, and look forward to the next episode as well. Thank you.